Hello and Tashdale everyone. We have a very special program for this week's panel discussion program on Tibet TV. Today we will talk about some of the major environmental issues that Tibet faces today. In general, I'm sure we are all aware of some of the major environmental issues that Tibet is undergoing, like mining activities, damming and hydroelectricity projects, forced resettlement of the nomadic community, climate change and biodiversity problems. But I believe there is still a great deal to learn about how these man-made environmental changes impact the host country, that is Tibet in particular, and the neighboring countries and the world in general. Just to give you an example of how rich Tibet is in terms of the natural environmental resources, China in July this year has announced that it will set up a natural drinking water industry which comes at a cost of $6 billion in the next 3 to 5 years. This is just to give you an example of how rich Tibet is in terms of the freshwater resources. Well, the program is special in that the speakers will take a hike up the Triund Mountain in Dharamshala. I'm sure many of you will know about this Triund Mountain in Dharamshala, and they will discuss about Tibet's environment as they take a hike up the mountain and observe the environment here in India. The speakers for the program are first Mr. Gabriel Lafitte, who is an environmentalist with a special focus on Tibet's environment, and Mr. Tenpa Gyaltsen and Mr. Jigme Norbu, both researchers at the Environment and Development Desk of the Tibet Policy Institute of the Central Tibetan Administration. Our camera crew will follow them as they walk up the mountain and discuss Tibet's environment. Here they are.
Oh, this pass, it's quite steep.
Yes, Gabriel.
Maybe, do you think we're already at 3,000 meters?
Oh, it's not 3,000. I think it's around 1,000 probably.
Look at the view. My God, look at that.
Yeah, we have
Oh.
a nice view.
What a wonderful valley. Jigme Norbu, when I look down on the valley at all of those slate roofs that come from slate in the mountains, which used to be the sea floor, isn't it amazing that up here high in the Himalayas there is rock that once was underneath the ocean? Do you think Tibetans understand that?
Yeah, we have some of that rocks which are coming from the sea, and we do have some of rocks still in Tibetan areas. They found it and they consider it's a very holy, and they think they believe that once upon a time the Tibet is under the sea. Yeah, something like that. And
But where's the evidence? What makes them believe that?
Gabriel, you know the fossil rocks.
Oh, the fossilized seashells, the ammonites.
Yeah, ammonites, and they have some of the fish. I mean, the structures are still in that.
The skeletons.
Rock. Yeah, skeletons and all the things are still in.
And we can find this at 5,000, 6,000 meters.
Yeah, we do.
Incredible.
Yeah, we do.
Absolutely incredible. To think that the earth could uplift. No wonder the Tibetans think the land is something special.
Yeah.
Well, let's keep climbing then, and we'll see some more of it.
Yeah, we need
We've
to.
got a long way to go.
Yeah, we have 2 hours left.
2 hours. Okay.
Yeah, I give.
Okay. Let's get cracking. Oh, Jigme Norbu, look.
Oh.
Here in the middle of this beautiful valley we suddenly have electricity, an electric power pylon. But here in the mountains this must be hydroelectricity. That's
Yes,
good.
yes.
I mean, surely it's good that the local village people have access to electricity in such a remote area. But Tibetans seem to have a problem with hydropower. I mean, what's your objection? Surely hydropower is a good thing.
In case of, if you look at the Indian side, especially Himachal is a very good thing to provide electricity for the village and to village. That case, it's a very good thing. But in terms of, if you look at it in Tibet, I think it's a very big problem. Regarding the Chinese government and special tower regions, they're trying to build a lot of the hydropower dams, but the main aim is not to benefit the local Tibetans.
So you're making a distinction between small local hydropower schemes like this one up here in the mountains and really big schemes that export electricity to people far away, thousands of kilometers away. Is that the problem?
Yeah, this is not only things whether I compare with the small or big, but as compared to Tibet, they consider and the government try to say that we are going to build a hydropower to benefit the Tibetan people, and especially for the rural area and the local people. But in that case, I don't think so. We have enough hydropower in Tibet. Still, the Chinese government try to build lots of big dams. But the main aim is to get all these resources or electricity to mainland China.
So these new dams in a cascade that goes right across these rushing mountain rivers that plunge from the Tibetan plateau, I believe China now plans something like 130 new dams across the rivers. I mean, this is massive. This must be the biggest dam building program the world has ever seen. This is completely different to what we're talking about here is just a local hydro scheme for the village.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying I'm a little bit worried in the sense that government tried to say that it will reduce some of the emission to that less, that coal protection, so that most of the Chinese, they depends on the coal protection. So they need to shift that position to the hydropower. But even though that they're trying to build such a big dams within the Tibetan plateaus areas, I feel it's very big, huge and tragedy what I feel. Because if you look at the whole picture and the whole area of Tibetan plateau itself is a very seismic or earthquake prone zone area.
An active seismic zone.
If you look at
it. It sure is.
Yes, from recently I noticed that from Lhasa to Zayul or Payul, we know that these areas covers under the fifth prone earthquake zone.
It's full of fault zones.
Yes, it is.
But what about the dams themselves, these big dams? I mean, a hydro power dam must interrupt the river. There's a dry section where the river is no longer flowing at all because all of the water has been diverted into pipes that rush down to turn the turbines. So what happens to all of the fish and the other species that are actually endemic to Tibet?
Yes. Yeah, it will definitely harm for the downstream, and especially like if you look at the biodiversity or some kind of these things, it definitely hurt. And not only these things, and even the most of these hydropower projects are very much near to some of the mining company. If I give you examples like that Shetome part, some of the Yalunzangbo tributaries are used for this dams, and so they can easily get water to that mining activities.
I've actually seen some scientists make presentations that suggest that the sheer weight of water impounded, captured in a hydro dam, even a hydro dam that they call run of the river, as if it doesn't interrupt the river at all, but in reality it does interrupt the river, and you do still have to have a dam, you do still have to hold a lot of water in the dam so that it flows at a very regular pace and is seasonally evened out. The sheer weight of water and the sediment that collects in the dam really adds so much pressure on the ground, on the earth. Is there any scientific evidence that hydro dams do cause earthquakes?
Yes, there are scientific. Special geologists, what they said is there is, and on two perspectives. One perspective is just like the volume or the the pressure of the water,
The weight.
yeah, weight of the water, which easily call for the earthquake. This is the one thing. Another thing is the water sink inside the ground. It's just like the water just played like oil. It's lubricate and it's easy to call the earthquake. That's for the two reasons that the earthquake will be easily come under such an earthquake prone areas.
You know, you guys are right at the cutting edge. This is the latest science. This is right at the forefront of, the connections that scientists, they've been worrying that there were connections between dams and earthquakes, but it's remained, controversial, unproven. But you're telling me the latest science, and you guys are clearly right on top of it. Oh, Jigme Norbu, look, there's a nomad, a Himalayan nomad with his sheep and his goats on such a steep slope. Amazing. But in your country, in Tibet, the nomads must have much more room to move around with their sheep and their goats and their yaks, yeah?
Yes, in Tibet it's a very vast countries, and we have a traditional way of huddling and doing cattling with Tibetan animals, just like yaks.
So, Jigme Norbu, how are the nomads of Tibet doing?
I should say it's very hard for Tibetan nomads inside Tibet. In terms of they are totally changing the traditional way of life into modern structures.
What's wrong with that?
Oh, this is a very good question. We Tibetan have a traditional, and we Tibetan nomads, especially if you look at Tibetan nomads, they have lived 9,000 years with peaceful and harmony within the Tibetan areas.
The nomadic way of life goes back 9,000 years?
Yes, Gabriel.
Wow,
it's 9,000 years.
Yeah.
And in terms of that, they do have well structures, and they have a traditional way and sustainable way of structure. They sustain and they live very harmony with animal as well as the environment structures. So they have built a very eco structures in terms of that. If you look at the all view, its structures are very well established in terms of traditional. But if you look at these days, what we are talking about, a certain way of structures, I think it's the Tibetan nomads are doing a great job in terms of sustainable development.
I've travelled with Chinese scientists on the grasslands, and what they say is that there is a contradiction between grass and animals. You can't have both. You have to choose. You either have the grass or you have the animals, and that means that as soon as you have animals eating the grass, you have degradation. But is that how Tibetans see it?
In terms of Tibetan nomads, I don't think so. There is not at all contradiction with. We can have both. The Chinese government trying to create a problem within the Tibetan nomads. They can't be both in the sense they are lived for the long time, and if you look at the history of Tibet, they are sustained, they believe just like they have both in their life. They can do the best way they are doing it.
So, Jigme Norbu, could I sum up my understanding of what you're saying, that the traditional grazing economy of Tibet was sustainable, it was manageable, it was skillful, and it was also productive, and that China has really basically misunderstood the nature of the land of Tibet. It just doesn't understand the dynamics of a very unpredictable land, which you have to know really intimately in order to be productive and be sustainable, as you say, over 9,000 years.
Yes, exactly. You got what I mean to say. The Chinese government, they think that the main cause or main problem creator is nomads. And if you look at this is one thing, and another thing is that they want control over the watershed of Tibetan Plateau, so that they want to remove all these areas where the nomads are staying, which are very much influenced with these areas watershed. So they want to remove these nomads to the concrete house. In terms of the concrete house, if you look at them, their day-to-day lives and how they survive, it's very difficult. It's very pathetic way. And even though the Chinese government providing some of subsidies, I don't think that it will be managed or it will be benefit for them. And I have a story to tell you that some of their children are, in terms of poverty, they are not managing, they are not getting a good subsidies. Some of the governments, if you look at, I give you the Muru, it's one of the Amdo regions. It's very much near to the Chongonbo. What they are facing is that before they are building that concrete house, government told that they are going to give you some kind of houses for the nomads people, and they need to give them some monies. And later on, what they do is they give lots of money. The nomads, they have to give lots of money for them, but they are staying like very poverty. What they're doing is the children are not able to send to schools. What they do is the children get pictures with some tourists. The children are earning their life. This is the one indication that the nomads are facing.
So in this particular place you've just been telling me about, you're saying that the only income the family has comes from the children posing for photographs of the tourists.
Yes, exactly. If one photograph, they will charge 1 rupee, no, 1 yen. So they are suffering some of family, they totally depends on their children.
So the bottom line is these people are poor.
Yes.
But China would argue that these people have always been poor, that they're actually raising the incomes of the nomads.
It is not like that. If you look at the way of the nomads, if they still stay like nomads, they can manage, and they have every day. Even though they will not go further, the poverty line, they will become like they do day-to-day lives, and they will manage by what they have in their life.
So the bottom line is the nomads are losing their land.
Yes.
They are reduced to poverty and dependence on subsistence rations provided by the state. So their future seems to be getting smaller and smaller on such a huge land.
In total, what I feel is nomads are losing their economic as well as the social, and the most important, they are losing their culture. And now it's just like nomads are nobody.
Now, Tenpa, Jigme Norbu has been telling me that the nomads are having a hard time, but still the land of Tibet is there. The clouds are there, the mountains are there. But when I look up at the mountains, they've disappeared behind the clouds. And that reminds me, I wanted to ask you about the climate of Tibet. Is there a really profound change happening to the climate in Tibet?
Definitely. There's so much happening on Tibetan Plateau. And the kind of, you see there's so much change we have experienced here. And if you ask those Tibetans who have been coming from Tibet, they said the change in Tibet, the climate change in Tibet has been much more severe in the last 2 decades. It has been very visible. And if you say like this year until recent times, the whole winter there has been no snowfall in some part of Tibet.
Really?
That's a drastic change.
That's scary.
And that's not good for the summer growing season.
Now, if there's no snow in winter, that means the rock remains bare. And as I understand what the scientific reports are saying, that if the rock remains bare, it heats up much more quickly when the springtime comes, and that changes the temperature of the entire plateau, and that in turn influences the jet stream, and that in turn influences the monsoon. So whether India gets an adequate rainfall in the monsoon season actually really depends on how much snow there is in Tibet in winter. So this has, huge implications. But I also wanted to come back to something you just said about the growing season. If the growing season, as Tibet warms up faster than anywhere else in the world, surely that's a good thing. Tibet's such a cold place. What's the problem with an increased growing season?
Yeah, that's what everyone have been discussing these days. So for some it seems like a good thing because winters are warmer, which means there's less extreme weather in winter. But the problem is how long this can go on, how good this can be for the long term. And if there's increase in temperature, it means there's greater loss of moisture that is soaked underground, or we call it permafrost. Scientifically, it's called permafrost. And if the temperature increase on Tibetan plateau is much more greater than anywhere else, as you know it, and because it's high, because of the high elevation, and because of that makes it very vulnerable. And we have seen in recent years that the kind of permafrost degradation, or the loss of moisture content within the soil, has been much greater than anywhere else. So if that happens, then there will be desertification happening, which is happening in many parts of Tibet. You see, northeastern part of Tibet, or the Amdo area, there has been extensive desertification, and that will go on, and then this growing season that we have been talking about, it might not last for too long. And if the rise of temperature means also glacier retreat, there will be more and more snow caps be lost, and what will be left behind is barren rock mountains, and that will increase the temperature, as you said earlier. That's why Tibetan Plateau is called the rainmaker of Asia, because just as you said, because with high elevation and cold weather, or sometimes because of the intensity of heat, it circulates the air or absorbs the moisture from Bay of Bengal or Arabian Sea. But the important point here is, if the increase of temperature continue at the current rate, it means much more glacier retreat and permafrost degradation, which means loss of moisture under the grass and also loss of glacier snow caps. That will lead to shrinking of Asia's 6 greatest rivers. And many of Asia's greatest rivers come from Tibet, and many of them have their origin from somewhere from the glacier or from permafrost. So if permafrost lost, then rivers like Yangtze River, Yellow River, Mekong River, Salem River, all the source of these rivers would be shrinking. Just as because most of these rivers originate somewhere from the northern part of Tibet, which has this huge grassland. And if grassland loses the moisture content, as I said earlier, the desertification follows. So this is a very dangerous thing for the Tibetan people and Tibetan plateau, and it is much more greater threat to the whole of Asia itself. So this is not an easy issue, and this is not a good thing that's happening in Tibet.
Tenpa, it seems to me that, this is a complex story. It's paradoxical even that there are places that are warming, there are places that are cooling, there are places that are wetter in Tibet, but there are also places that are, as you say, desertifying, which is, very worrying. And I guess we have to get used to this all around the world, that it's far too simple to just say, the world is warming. Well, a lot of places would like to be warmer. What's the problem? But in all of these complex scenarios that the scientists are coming up with, one aspect that I find particularly alarming is they say as the permafrost melts away and the water drains out of the soil, and the wetlands of Tibet, which are the habitats or the over summer nesting places of migratory birds, the wetlands too are disappearing. So we have this paradox. On the one hand, the glaciers are melting, the lakes are rising, the wetlands are drying, but all of this is a profound and very worrying change. I'm frankly amazed that the world is not paying attention to the effects of climate change in Tibet in the way that they pay attention to, say, the small island states that are disappearing as the seas rise.
That's true, because maybe the coastal land, they see it more, the kind of climate change, impact of climate change is much more visible. But the implication of climate change on Tibetan plateau is, the world should understand, is much more greater.
It's profound. It's a profound change.
Exactly. It impacts the climate change, the weather pattern itself of the Asia itself, and then it dries up to 6 greatest Asian rivers. And then Tibetan, as you said, Tibetan plateau is home to some of the largest wetlands. So this is not an easy thing, and this is a serious issue
But we're just being foolish. Then we are just being foolish in assuming that because the glaciers are melting, there is more runoff from the rivers, there is a dividend for downstream China, and that's all we need to be concerned about. But that's only short-term thinking.
Definitely.
Tenpa, what is the connection between India and Tibet in climate?
Oh, Gabriel, there's so much change. You see the change in weather in a minute. The time between your conversation with the Jigme Norbu and now you and me, in a minute, so much has changed. You know.
The clouds
Look,
are coming
these
right
clouds came
down.
out from nowhere.
Yeah.
Now, there are scientists who believe, not only believe, there are a large group of scientists who say the pattern where the weather pattern in India is influenced by the Tibetan Plateau. Now, this is very interesting. So it sounds how there can be, because Tibet Plateau has high elevation and presence of huge glaciers. We have like 46,000 glaciers, like the largest amount of glacier on Earth. And that and the intense heat that is present on Tibetan Plateau. And that creates the circulation of air circulation, and it absorbs the moisture from Arabian Sea and Bay of Bengal, and that's how it pulls in the monsoon. And as the monsoon comes in, the cloud with the rain, what do you call that? The rain cloud, as it's been pulled in towards the Tibetan Plateau, the high Himalayan mountains blocks it. And that's how India has the monsoon.
How amazing.
That's
I mean, to think that
it's very interesting.
clouds that are able to carry billions of tons of water floating through the sky
Exactly.
are actually magnetically attracted to India by Tibet, by the heat. Now, you mentioned the word heat.
Yes.
Whenever we think of the word Tibet, we immediately think of cold. But you're reminding us that at this time of the year, in springtime, Tibet actually heats up really, really fast because of all that bare rock, and that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, definitely, Gabriel. You know, in recent decades, there has been unpredictability of the weather in Tibet itself, which means we are not able to predict the monsoon here in India. You know, in the last few years, we have seen either the monsoon arrive earlier or arriving late, or weak monsoon. All this is influenced by the kind of weather we have in on Tibetan Plateau. Because of Tibetan Plateau, or change of weather pattern on Tibetan Plateau, if it's influencing the weather here in India, then it's a great threat.
That's a really big question, isn't it?
It's a big question. It's hard to answer.
Tenpa, that's a really important point. I mean, you've got a big story as a professional Tibetan environmentalist to tell your Indian hosts here in India that if we understand what's happening in Tibet, they can give India like 6 months warning of whether there's going to be a strong monsoon or a weak monsoon. So this is an important point.
Definitely, it's a very important point, and it's not only that we are saying the Tibetan Plateau as the rainmaker of Asia, or that Tibetan Plateau influences the monsoon. It's said by a lot of Chinese scientists. It's said by a lot of Indian scientists. This is a general belief and understanding among the scientific groups, scientist groups. So this is very important, and the Indian government actually realizes this, and there are a lot of Indian friends who have been working on it, and this is a good sign. And we are very happy about it, that something good will come out of it.
Oh, Tenpa, all these stories you've been telling me about climate change, my head is spinning. Can we just slow down for a bit?
Sure.
I'd just like to take a break for a moment and just look at the view.
This is beautiful, isn't it? This is very beautiful. Why don't we go down this?
That looks like a good spot.
Yeah. I feel
Let's
like
do
we are in
this.
Tibet now.
Really?
Yeah, it's beautiful out
Wow. How is that possible? It reminds you of...
here. You see all that's beautiful in this world. Let's take a seat somewhere.
Okay, yes, let's
Take a
sit down.
seat.
Okay.
This is beautiful, huh?
Tenpa, tell me something about mountains. I want to understand the mountains from a Tibetan viewpoint. I want to see it through your eyes.
You know, it's a Tibetan habitual. It's within us. It's a tradition. Maybe it's a tradition that we are born with this beautiful nature that we respect so much. And you see that beautiful hill down there, like it's kind of
Oh, yeah.
peak over there. That hill.
Yes.
In Tibet, it might be one of the sacred mountains. And
How is that possible? It doesn't even look like such a big mountain. It's not a
no, it
particularly...
doesn't have to be big. It's big or small. That's not the issue. The thing is how important that hill is to the local ecosystem. And a lot of these beautiful sacred mountains have great significance to the ecosystem itself, as said by many scientists and researchers in recent years. And we all...
What do you mean by significance? I mean, if a mountain is, you know, in traditional folk belief declared to be sacred,
Yeah.
how does that translate into, you know, what a scientist would say is, let's say, an endangered ecosystem?
Definitely, you know.
What's the connection?
Oh, I think there's a great connection here, because for the Tibetans, sacred mountain is it's about culture, it's about religion, and we believe that sacred mountain holds the fertility of the soil, and it's the deity that resides in that sacred mountains which kind of protects the people and protects the land, and that the sacred mountain, and if we respect and preserve that, then sacred mountains protect us and the land. So there's that connection, there's that belief.
So Tenpa, you're telling me that this is going way back, even before Buddhism arrived in Tibet, going all the way back to, you know, when we can find the very, very first manufactured metal objects in Tibet. I think they're called tokchak.
Yes, they are called tokchak. I'm not too sure if the period between what I just said earlier and the tokchak might be of the same period, but this is what you said is kind of suppose what I just said about Tibetans acquiring a high degree of scientific knowledge. So this can validate what I just said.
So why didn't they go on to, you know, mine all the resources to, you know, continue producing such things?
That's the kind of question I always asked. You know, when I was doing a special research on sacred mountains, and I came across this. And the answer to that is, when they acquired that great scientific knowledge and capability, I think they did mine and they did extensive extraction of resources. Yeah, they did. And then, because they have high degree of knowledge, scientific knowledge, they realized the land is no longer able to produce it, because Tibetan plateau is very fragile, and they realized that. And then they, maybe it might be the religious leaders or whoever it was, they start to propagate new system belief about the environment, about the ecosystem, and this knowledge about ecosystem was very, very profound, and they start to understand the nature itself, and they said maybe exploitation of resource might not be good for the future of the civilization and future of the Tibetan plateau itself. That's why they start to spot sacred mountains, sacred valleys, special locations which has special ecological importance and nerve centers. That's why we say sacred mountains are nerve centers, or like the heart of the ecosystem, so which should not be disturbed.
If you damage the nerve center, you damage everything. I mean, such a belief, I can see now how the scientists can find such a strong correlation between those areas that Tibetans have traditionally designated as sacred sites. As you say, they're not just everywhere, they're quite specific places that scientists say are also, you know, highly significant habitats. But the further corollary is that if you disturb such places, there'll be many, many consequences downstream, downriver, below, and maybe that's what the modern mining industry that seems to be growing now strongly in Tibet doesn't seem to have understood, that these traditional beliefs actually tell us something we need to know.
That's exactly what I'm going to say. You know, the problem here is these sacred mountains are very rich in minerals, and a lot of times mining happens around the sacred mountains. And for the Tibetans, as I said earlier, sacred mountains are the nerve center of the ecosystem itself. And they believe that if something happened to the sacred mountains, or if you damage the sacred mountains, it will anger the deity, or it will disturb the ecosystem, and which will have severe consequences for the health of the society and health of the environment and the very fertility of the soil. So that's why there have been continuous protests in Tibet against the mining practices And I'm sure you might know it that since 2009, as we do research on this, we were able to count more than 20 such protests against mining. There
Really?
might have been many more, but that's what we were able to count.
Really,
Yeah.
I'm quite amazed. We don't seem to hear about this in the wider world. But couldn't mining be beneficial for local Tibetan communities? I mean, it could provide employment, training, job opportunities, new careers, even finance the building of a local school or a hospital, or enable the Tibetans to enter the modern economy.
A lot of mining happens everywhere in Australia, in India, in many countries, and they do benefit local community. But the problem in Tibet is there's a different practice when it comes to mining. And once the locals are neither benefited nor employed, they provide very little or almost no employment. Most of the employees come from other provinces that's outside the local province. And there is no proper pre-assessment of the mining site. And there's no proper process after the post-production. So what happens here is they neither set up schools nor healthcare centers as necessary in many other countries. And there's no, what do you call the royalty or whatever, that the percentage of your profit should be given to the local community, and it should do something that benefits the local community. There's no such thing. So that's why mining is not only a threat to the local ecosystem, but it's also a threat to the local community itself. There's a land grab.
I'm really surprised to hear that, because as I understand it, the Chinese state-owned mining companies that are operating in Tibet also are the pioneers of China extending its reach around the world and going global. And if they operate in my country, in Australia, they have to obey Australian law and follow Australian standards of conduct. But in Tibet, they don't do that?
No. As I said earlier, the way they mine is not proper. And a lot of times they're just, as local Tibetans said, mining companies will come, dig and leave. So what basically they do is they just dig up the land, erode it, pollute the water, pollute the ecosystem itself, and then leave the garbage behind for the local community to do the repair, and they leave.
Now that really worries me.
This is a serious issue.
That's a real worry, because if we take a long-term view, we would say that the main mineral that the Chinese geologists are finding in Tibet is copper, and along with the copper there is gold and silver and other minerals. But in order to extract copper, you have to dig up 100 tons for every 1 ton of copper that you extract. So by definition, you are going to leave behind, after the mining is finished, 99 tons of waste, which has been turned into powder. So it's just like mud. And that has to remain there forever. So as you say, the mining company will come and go. Maybe the mine will last for 10 years, 20 years, maybe 30 years at the maximum before the whole mineral deposit is exhausted. And then what happens? You have to set up a tailings dam to protect those wastes, and the mining sites are right above the main rivers. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Gabriel, this tailings site, whatever, this rarely happen in Tibet. So there's always this problem of soil contamination, water contamination, and a lot of locals in some nomadic community, they have talked about cattle dying of, like, dozens of cattle dying of unknown disease because after drinking water that come through one of this mining site. Or there have been issue of fish dying in large numbers. So there are more and more of such things happening.
But let's be clear. What is in the mining wastes that is so dangerous?
I think that because mining is not an easy process, they use a lot of chemicals that are very contaminating and very hazardous. And if left behind, as I said earlier, it will contaminate the soil and the water. And Tibetan waters are not only important for Tibet itself, as we talked about it earlier. The rivers, if we pollute the rivers, then this pollution will go all the way down the Vietnam and Cambodia, some countries that are not even close to Tibet. So this is a serious issue.
Now, Tenpa, you are a professional Tibetan environmentalist. You can assess such questions about whether it was just a natural landslide or man-made. What's your conclusion?
We came to conclude that it was actually caused by human errors. It was because of irresponsible mining practice. They dumped too much waste on steep hills. That's how it happened. And the mining company has very little understanding of the land itself. And I think maybe the local government did not enforce the law properly.
The bottom line I'm getting from what you're telling me is something really fundamental. China doesn't understand the land or the people of Tibet. They don't understand how fragile the land is, how seismically active it is, how prone to earthquakes and landslides and debris flows, and how loose the rock is because the plateau is still rising, that there's just multiple misunderstandings, and this is sometimes leading even immediately, very quickly, to tragedies like the 83 people who lost their lives at Gyama.
It's very sad that 83 lives were lost.
Yeah.
And those who were responsible were not punished. This is a sad issue.
Tenpa, I've seen pictures of Tibetans protesting at the very source of the Mekong, at Zate. I think in Tibetan that actually means the source of the Mekong. But the pictures showed that they put up posters of China's leader, Xi Jinping. They put up quotes from him saying we must do everything we can to protect their environment. But still, what actually happened on the ground?
What you just said is a very recent event. This happened in Zate, in the Qinghai province of Tibet area. And what happened was, it's very interesting. In 2002, Chinese government set up what they called Sanjianyu National Nature Reserve. It was during the Chiang Zemin presidency. And they declared a large area of the Tibet area as a national nature reserve and removed many Tibetan nomads from those areas and designated it as a national nature reserve.
A protected area?
Yeah, protected area. And 2012 and 13, what they did was, in 2013, a mining company came in on the same area.
Into a protected area? That must be illegal.
Then, around 10 years back, they removed nomads from that area, and after 10 years, they are bringing in mining companies. This puts a big question on the very policy behind why Tibetan nomads are being forcefully removed. We Tibetans always believe that Tibetan nomads are removed so that they can come in and dig our land. This is what exactly happened in Zate area.
Tenpa, what this all adds up to me, is something a bit shocking. I can start to understand why Tibetans seem to have such grief, such sadness in their hearts, that they are losing control over their own land, losing control over their relationship with the mountain deities, their capacity to protect the land, their capacity to maintain both productivity and sustainability, that development is accelerating, but it's extractive, exploitative, resource-intensive enclaves that damage the environment, and at the same time Tibetans are actually losing their land. So I start to understand some of the depth of sadness behind the recent concerns that Tibetans are expressing.
Definitely. It's sad. It's really sad.
Tenpa, yes, it is sad, but in my experience, Tibetans have this amazing capacity, even in the middle of sadness, to be hopeful. So Tenpa, tell me something hopeful.
Well, we are very hopeful, as we always have been. And good thing about good thing is that despite being a very difficult situation in Tibet, there are a lot of Chinese environment NGOs being set up in Tibet areas, and there are a lot of Tibetan environment NGOs and monasteries working on conservation of environment, planting trees, and there are a lot of good things happening, and we are very positive. And even the local Tibetans, they are very hopeful of the Central Chinese government, and that's why they have always put their faith to the Central Chinese government, and there is positive environment being happening in Tibetan areas in recent times. Very hopeful.
Oh, Tenpa, this is such a steep slope. On the
is.
one side, the mountain seems to just go straight up, and the rhododendron forest seems to keep going up with it. And on the other side, it falls away to the valley so steeply.
Oh.
A long way to go.
Actually, this is nice, right? Okay, maybe now we can walk a little faster so that we disappear.
Okay. Oh, there are rhododendrons everywhere here.
Yeah.
Oh, look, beautiful rhododendron
Oh,
flower
there is a big
on the
one.
ground.
There is
Aha.
a big one.
In fine flower, in full flower. Now, Jigme, what I want to know, can we find such rhododendrons and such lush forest like this in Tibet? Because I thought Tibet is much drier than where we are here.
Yeah, if you look at some of the areas, eastern part of Tibet, we have lots of forests.
Okay.
So I will give you an example of the Kongpo and Nyingti.
Now we're talking about the more humid eastern Tibet.
Yes, and
I've heard that's beautiful forests.
yeah,
there.
it is very beautiful place, and it is moderate temperatures, and you will get lots of medicine plants.
Now,
as
I've
well.
heard about this. This is where some of the European plant hunters in the 1920s went climbing up the mountains, and they found these rhododendron forests at a very specific altitude, and they took them back to Europe, and now people all over the world grow these flowers, and I think the world has probably forgotten that they actually originally come from Tibet,
this
from
is
the
a-
Himalayas. This is the real biodiversity hotspot.
It is
I
a
mean,
bios-
what do we mean by a hotspot? I think it means there's
Yeah,
a
exactly.
huge variety of plants, of animals, and therefore these are special areas. I mean, only in a few places around the world.
Not only like that. If you look at the Tibetan itself, and we Tibetan have a traditional way of preserving, and as well as we Tibetan have a traditional way of having our own medicines. All these medicines products.
This is a medicine?
This is a medicine, Gabriel.
I'm amazed.
Yeah, it is a medicine.
What makes it a medicine?
This is mainly for the females who have biological problems,
okay.
some of the circulation problems, and we will use it. And it is also used for some of the medicines. Sometimes we get some blood problem or something like that.
Oh yes.
We will use it, and at the same time in daily life we use this as some kind of. We will usually we have some kind of, we need some water and something like that. We can pick it, and then we will eat some of this part, and it is very good in nectars.
Oh yes, I can see that.
Yeah.
This is definitely a plant that has lots of nectar as well as
And
lots
not
of
only
pollen.
like that, we Tibetan call it is a tangme medo.
Tangme meto.
Yeah, tangme medo. It's a Tibetan name, tangme medo. Yeah, it's very popular in some of the Kongpo and Nyingti areas.
So, Jigme Norbu, to sum it all up, would you say that the biodiversity in Tibet is protected or is it threatened?
Yes, it is a threat, I should say. Yeah, it is a threat. In all terms, if you look at animal, if you look at the plants, if you look at the areas where the logging is still going on inside Tibet.
Oh, that's very sad.
Yeah,
That's very
is,
unfortunate.
Yeah, it is.
Now, there's a lot of wildlife in Tibet that migrates huge distances. Are they safe?
If you look at the wildlife, the Chinese government, and especially if you look at some of the areas, especially like migration part, if you look at the Changdang part, the government has fenced some of the areas so that it's very difficult to move or to migrate to some of the Shatush or some of the Chirus. It's very difficult.
So these migratory mammals like antelopes and gazelles, they have to travel huge distances to migrate just to give birth. But if Tibet has now become a land of fences, if even the nomads have to build fences, does this disrupt their migration?
Yes, it is. It is completely facing a problem with animal also. If you look at a huge animal moving from one direction to another, it's very difficult to pass these fences, and some of them are killed by the fences. And then not only like antelopes, there are lots of wild asses and wild yaks are also moving. The government tried to say that the number of increase. I do agree some of these animals numbers increase, but at the same time there are animals killed by some of the poachers, some of the activities still going inside Tibet.
But this is one of the areas where these animals originally evolved and spread throughout Asia once the last ice age melted away. So Tibet has been the source of dispersal of so many species, and now that original area of evolution is now itself threatened.
Yes, it is. If you look at some of these things, and if you look at the whole, not only that what animal we discuss, and there are some birds which have come from whole way from India to Britain to Tibet. They stay during the summer and then they leave from winter time. They move towards Indian place. And not only like that, not only Tibetans consider Tibet as a roof of the world and it's a biodiversity. But if you these days, many, it's Western scientists as well as the Western, Western people. And if you look at some of the Chinese scientists, they do consider Tibet as a very holy place in terms of biodiversity, as well as if you look at some of the long and thousands of traditional and ancient plants and animals still and need to be preserved, and we need to look at these things. And one time it may become like the animals, just like we show some of the pictures or some of the films that we can't see in our day-to-day life.
That's really sad. That's a really sad story that you've just told me, Jigme Norbu.
Yeah.
I thought Tibet is such a huge land that, how could the biodiversity possibly be under threat? But I'm really worried now, because I've also heard from scientists too that there are many, many species whose future is now in doubt, endangered.
Yeah, and then if you look at the terms of all changes, with the the areas and altitude, the most of the problem of really faced by some of these diversity animals, just like they are facing it. They don't have such a easy way to move one direction to another, just like what we human beings do. When we feel something, we can use some ACs. Animals, they don't have that kind of facilities. Yeah. They have faced the reality, and they have to face that some of the cruel people who easily kill them.
I thought Tibet must be the last unfenced land in the world, but even in Tibet now we find poachers who will, kill a beautiful animal just for a few ounces of precious, fine, downy fur from the underbelly. This is very sad, very, very sad.
Yeah, Gabriel, it's very sad.
So here we come to the end of our discussion, and I hope that you learned more about Tibet's environment through this discussion. As you can see, some of the major environmental topics of concern are damming activities, forced resettlement of the nomadic community, mining activities and destruction of the sacred mountains in Tibet, climate changes, etc. These problems are all man-made, and these have a huge implication not just to Tibet but also to nations close to it and the world at large. As I understand from the discussions, the speakers conclusively remark that China basically misunderstands the very nature of the land of Tibet, which for centuries have been leading a very skillful, productive and sustainable lifestyle in close harmony with its environment. Despite all the environmental issues that we have come to know through this discussion, the discussion also gives us some idea of the grassroots campaigns to protect Tibet's environment by individuals and other environmental protection groups. These efforts made by individuals and organizations give us hope about Tibet's environment, and we sincerely believe that the Chinese government will take notice of the environmental issues taking place on the roof of the world and pave way for protection and development. So with this, I conclude this program. Thank you for watching and see you again next Friday.